The smell of fresh paint still lingered in my new apartment as I stood in the doorway, keys clutched in my trembling hand. 450 square feet. That's all I could afford after the divorce. 450 square feet of freedom, independence, and a fresh start that had cost me everything I thought I knew about my life. My name is Elena Martinez, and this is the story of how my ex-husband's mockery turned into the most satisfying moment of my entire existence. Buckle up, because this journey has more twists than you could ever imagine. Let me take you back to where it all began. 3 years before that fateful day in my tiny apartment, I was married to Marcus Hendricks, a successful investment banker who came from old money and never let anyone forget it. We'd met in college. I was a scholarship student studying art history. He was a business major whose tuition was paid for by a trust fund that could probably buy a small country. I fell hard for Marcus. He was charming, confident, and in those early days he made me feel like I was the most important person in his world. We got married right after graduation in a lavish ceremony that his parents planned and paid for. I should have seen the red flags then. How his mother picked out my dress, how his father decided where we'd have the reception, how Marcus never once asked what I wanted. For 5 years I played the role of Marcus's wife. I gave up my dreams of working in a museum to become the perfect society spouse. I attended charity galas, hosted dinner parties for his colleagues, and slowly watched my own identity disappear into the shadow of being Mrs. Hendricks. The marriage fell apart when I discovered Marcus was having an affair with his secretary. Cliché, right? But the cliché hurt just as much as something original would have. When I confronted him, he didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. "Elena, come on," he'd said, loosening his tie in our bedroom like we were discussing what to have for dinner. "You knew what this marriage was. You're my wife for appearances. She's for everything else." I filed for divorce the next day. Marcus didn't fight it. In fact, he seemed relieved. But what he did fight was the settlement. Despite the fact that I'd given up my career for him, that I'd spent 5 years making his life easier, supporting his ambitions, his lawyers argued that I'd contributed nothing of financial value to the marriage. And because I'd been young and naive when we got married, I'd signed a prenuptial agreement that heavily favored him. I walked away from that 5-year marriage with barely enough to rent a studio apartment and restart my life. The apartment I found was in a decent neighborhood, but it was tiny. The entire space was smaller than our walk-in closet had been in the penthouse we'd shared. But it was mine. I'd found it, I'd signed the lease, I'd painted the walls myself in a warm cream color that made me feel calm. I'd been living there for about 2 months when it happened. I was coming home from my new job as a junior curator at a small private gallery, finally pursuing my passion again, even if the salary was a fraction of what Marcus spent on watches. When I saw him, Marcus was standing in the lobby of my building, looking around with barely disguised disgust. He was wearing one of his expensive suits, his hair perfectly styled, radiating that air of superiority that I'd somehow found attractive once upon a time. "Elena," he said when he spotted me, his voice dripping with false concern, "I heard you were living here. I had to see it for myself." My stomach dropped. "What are you doing here, Marcus?" "I was in the neighborhood, meeting a client for lunch at that new French place on the corner. You know, the one with the Michelin star." "Oh, come on, Elena. Aren't you going to show me your new place? I'm dying to see where you ended up." His tone was mocking, cruel. This was the real Marcus, the one I'd glimpsed more and more often in those final years of marriage. Against my better judgment, I led him to the elevator. Maybe part of me wanted to prove that I was okay, that I didn't need his money or his approval. Maybe I was just too tired to fight. The elevator was old and slow, and Marcus made a show of examining it with exaggerated concern. "Is this thing safe? It sounds like it's going to break down any second." "It's fine," I said through gritted teeth. We rode up to the 4th floor in uncomfortable silence. I could feel his judgment radiating off him in waves. When we reached my door, for C with its brass numbers that I'd polished myself, I hesitated. "You know what, Marcus? I don't think this is a good idea." "Why?" "Embarrassed." He leaned against the wall, that infuriating smirk still on his face. "Come on, Elena. We were married for 5 years. I think I can handle seeing your little apartment." The way he said little made my blood boil. But I opened the door anyway, stepping into my space, my sanctuary, with Marcus following behind me. I watched his face as he took in the studio apartment, the small kitchenette with its two-burner stove, the Murphy bed that I pulled down from the wall at night, the single window that looked out onto the building next door, the small table I'd found at a thrift store where I ate my meals and worked on my laptop. Marcus laughed. Actually laughed. The sound echoed off my walls, filling my small space with his disdain. "Oh, Elena. This is just sad." He walked around, his expensive shoes clicking on my laminate floor. "This entire place is smaller than our bathroom was. How do you live like this? Where do you even put your clothes? Remember when you had a whole room just for your shoes? Now look at you. This is what happens when you throw away a good thing, Elena. This is what you chose." I felt tears pricking at my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not in front of him. Never in front of him again. I chose freedom, Marcus. I chose self-respect. I chose a life where I'm not just an accessory to someone else's ambition. Freedom. He gestured around the apartment. "You call this freedom? Elena, you're living in a shoebox. You went from a penthouse with a view of the city to this. Was it really worth it? Was your pride really worth eating ramen noodles and wearing second-hand clothes? How did you?" "Oh, please. I still have friends in the art world. I hear things. I know you're working at that tiny gallery for probably minimum wage. I know you can barely afford this place. And I know." He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper that was somehow more cutting than his shouts had been, "that you regret leaving me every single day." Before I could respond, before I could tell him exactly how wrong he was, there was a knock at my door. I frowned. I wasn't expecting anyone. Mrs. Chun sometimes stopped by with extra food from her cooking, but she usually called first. "Excuse me," I said to Marcus, grateful for any interruption. I opened the door and my breath caught in my throat. Standing in my hallway, wearing jeans and a simple black sweater that probably cost more than my monthly rent, was James Chun. Not Mrs. Chen's husband, the James Chun, tech billionaire, philanthropist, and one of the most influential people in the art world. He was also the owner of the private gallery where I worked. "Mr. Chun," I stammered, completely caught off guard. What are you doing here?" James smiled, the kind of warm smile that had made him famous for being one of the most approachable billionaires in the world. "I apologize for dropping by unannounced, Elena. I was visiting my aunt in the building, Mrs. Chun on the third floor, and she mentioned you lived here. I wanted to discuss something with you about the gallery, and I thought it might be nice to do it in person rather than calling you into the office on your day off." "Your aunt," I said, still processing this information. Mrs. Chun was James Chen's aunt? Small world, isn't it? He glanced past me into the apartment, his expression shifting slightly when he saw Marcus. "But I can see you have company. I should have called first. This is inappropriate of me." No, I said quickly, stepping back. "Please come in. This is my ex-husband, Marcus." He was just leaving. I turned to Marcus, who had gone completely pale. His mouth was opening and closing like a fish out of water. The smugness had evaporated from his face, replaced by something that looked like shock and dawning horror. "Marcus, this is James Chun. Mr. Chun, this is Marcus Hendricks." James extended his hand politely. Marcus shook it mechanically, still looking like he'd seen a ghost. "Nice to meet you," James said pleasantly. Then he turned to me, his back partially to Marcus. "Elena, I wanted to talk to you about the exhibition we're planning for next month. I've been reviewing your curatorial proposal and I have to say it's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. The way you've conceptualized the narrative flow, the artists you've selected. It's exactly the kind of fresh perspective we need." My heart was racing. "Thank you, Mr. Chun. That means so much. Please call me James. We're colleagues after all." He glanced around the apartment, and I braced myself for judgment, for the same mockery Marcus had shown. But his expression was thoughtful, appreciative even. "I love what you've done with this space. It's cozy, personal. So much better than those sterile designer apartments that all look the same. Is that your work?" He was pointing to a small painting I'd done myself, one I'd hung above my thrift store table. It was a landscape from a trip I'd taken alone to the coast, one of my first acts of freedom after the divorce. "Yes," I said quietly. I paint sometimes. Just a hobby. It's lovely. You have real talent, Elena. He turned back to me, his expression serious. Actually, that's part of what I wanted to discuss. I've been thinking about expanding the gallery, opening a second location focused specifically on emerging artists and contemporary pieces. I'd like you to head it as the director. The world seemed to stop spinning. Director, I whispered. You'd have full curatorial control, a team working under you, and of course a significant salary increase. I'm thinking we could start you at around $250,000, plus bonuses based on exhibition success. We'd also include a housing stipend. I know we don't pay our junior curators enough to live comfortably in this city. I heard a strangled sound from Marcus's direction but didn't look at him. I couldn't tear my eyes away from James. I don't know what to say. Say you'll think about it. I know it's a big decision. James pulled out his phone. I'll have my assistant send over the formal offer on Monday. Take your time reviewing it. And Elena? I mean what I said about your talent. You have an extraordinary eye for art, and a gift for making it accessible to people. That proposal you wrote for the Impressionist exhibition last month? I've shown it to colleagues at the Met and the Guggenheim. They were impressed. He started toward the door, then paused. Oh, and I wanted to mention, my foundation is funding a new fellowship program for emerging curators. Full ride to do advanced studies at any institution in the world, plus a stipend for living expenses. Based on your work so far, I'd like to nominate you for the first cohort. If you're interested, of course. Yes. Yes, I'm very interested. Wonderful. We'll talk more on Monday. Enjoy your weekend, Elena. He nodded politely to Marcus. Mr. Hendricks. And then he was gone, leaving a silence in my tiny apartment that was deafening. I turned slowly to face Marcus. His face had gone from pale to red. His jaw clenched so tight I thought his teeth might crack. That was James Chun, he said unnecessarily. Yes. The James Chun. God, he's worth billions. I believe so. And he knows you. He knows your work. He offered you a job as a director. Marcus's voice was rising with each sentence. $250,000? That's more than I make. Is it? I kept my voice neutral, but inside I was screaming with joy. And a fellowship? To study anywhere in the world. He ran his hand through his perfect hair, messing it up for the first time since I'd known him. How do you know James Chun? I work for him, Marcus. At the gallery. He owns it. You never mentioned that your boss was James Chun. You never asked about my job. You were too busy assuming I was barely scraping by, eating ramen noodles and living in poverty. The words hung in the air between us. Marcus stared at me, really seeing me for maybe the first time since he'd arrived. I need to go, he said abruptly. I think that's a good idea. He walked to the door, then stopped, his hand on the knob. Elena, Goodbye, Marcus. He left without another word. I closed the door behind him, locked it, and then slid down to sit on the floor, my back against the wood. And then I started laughing. Deep, genuine, cathartic laughter that shook my whole body. Tears streamed down my face, happy tears this time. As I sat in my tiny apartment that Marcus had mocked, thinking about the job offer from one of the richest men in the world. But here's the thing, and this is important. Even without James's offer, even without the promise of money and prestige and opportunities, I'd already won. Because I'd chosen myself. I'd chosen my dreams, my passion, my self-respect over a life of comfortable unhappiness. The apartment was small, yes, but it was mine. Every square foot of it was mine. That weekend felt surreal. I kept expecting to wake up and discover it had all been a dream. But Monday came, and with it, an email from James's assistant with the formal offer letter. It was real. All of it. I met with James at the gallery on Tuesday. He walked me through his vision for the new space, asked for my input, treated me like the professional I'd worked so hard to become. He never once mentioned Marcus, never acknowledged the awkwardness of the situation. He was just normal, kind, respectful. Can I ask you something? I said when we were wrapping up the meeting. Of course. Why me? I mean, I appreciate this more than I can say, but I've only been working here for 2 months. There are curators with years more experience. James leaned back in his chair, considering his answer. Do you know why I started collecting art, Elena? I shook my head. When I made my first billion, I went a little crazy. Bought cars, houses, all the typical toys. But none of it felt meaningful. Then a friend dragged me to a small gallery show. Nothing fancy, just a local artist displaying her work in a converted warehouse. And I saw this painting of a woman standing at a window, looking out at a city she clearly couldn't afford to live in. But her face, she wasn't sad. She was determined, hopeful, free. He smiled at the memory. I bought that painting for $500. It's still my favorite piece in my collection, worth more to me than the Picassos and Monets. And I realized that art isn't about price tags or prestige. It's about the human experience. It's about seeing yourself in someone else's story. He looked directly at me. When I read your exhibition proposals, I see that understanding in every word. You don't curate for critics or collectors. You curate for the person who wanders in off the street, looking for something that speaks to them. That's rare, Elena. And it's valuable. I accepted the position that day. The news spread quickly through our social circles. I started getting calls and messages from people I hadn't heard from since the divorce. Suddenly, everyone wanted to have lunch, catch up, congratulate me on my success. I ignored most of them. But I did accept one invitation, from Marcus's mother of all people. Catherine Hendricks had never liked me during the marriage. I was too poor, too unsophisticated, too everything that wasn't good enough for her precious son. But there she was calling my cell phone asking to meet for tea. We met at a cafe in her neighborhood, one of those places where a cup of tea costs $15 and comes with a tiny pastry that wouldn't feed a bird. Catherine looked older than I remembered, more brittle. She ordered for both of us without asking what I wanted, old habits die hard, and then got straight to the point. I heard about your new position. Congratulations. Thank you. I also heard about Marcus's visit to your apartment and his subsequent encounter with James Chan. She stirred her tea with precise, controlled movements. He told me what he said to you about your living situation. Did he? I raised him better than that. Or at least I thought I did. She looked up at me, and I was surprised to see something that might have been regret in her eyes. I owe you an apology, Elena. I never treated you as you deserved. I saw you as someone taking advantage of my son, someone who wasn't good enough for our family. I was wrong. I didn't know what to say. You gave up your career for Marcus. You supported him, made his life easier, asked for nothing in return. And when he betrayed you, you left with grace and dignity. You rebuilt your life from nothing, and now look at you, director of a prestigious gallery, mentored by James Chan himself. She set down her teacup. You were always good enough, Elena. Better than good enough. It was Marcus who wasn't good enough for you. Catherine, let me finish, please. Marcus is my son and I love him. But he's weak. He always has been. He needs constant validation, constant praise. He measures himself by his possessions, by other people's envy. You, on the other hand, you measure yourself by your work, by your integrity. That's why you succeeded where he's beginning to fail. Fail. She smiled grimly. He made some poor investment decisions recently. Lost several major clients. The affair partner he was so enamored with? She left him for someone with better prospects. He's not destitute, of course. The trust fund will keep him comfortable. But his reputation is damaged, and in our world reputation is everything. I should have felt vindicated, triumphant. But all I felt was a distant sort of sadness for the man I'd once loved. I'm sorry to hear that. Are you? Catherine looked at me shrewdly. Truly. I'm sorry that he's hurting. I'm not sorry that I left. Good. You shouldn't be. She reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. This is the settlement you should have received. I've had my lawyers draw it up. It's not contingent on anything. Not on you forgiving Marcus, not on you keeping quiet about what happened. It's simply what you're owed for the years you gave to my son. I opened the envelope with shaking hands. The check inside was for $500,000. Catherine, I can't. You can and you will. Consider it back payment for services rendered as the perfect wife, or an apology from a foolish old woman who treated you poorly, or just karma finally balancing the scales. I don't care. But you earned this, Elena. Take it. I took it. And I used it to invest in my future. Some saved, some donated to art programs for underprivileged kids. Some used to help my parents who'd sacrificed so much to give me opportunities. The new gallery location opened 6 months later. It was beautiful. A converted warehouse in an up-and-coming neighborhood, full of light and possibility. The opening night was packed with collectors, critics, artists, and art lovers. James gave a speech about the importance of supporting emerging talent, and then he handed the microphone to me. I looked out at the crowd, at the faces of people who'd come to celebrate art and creativity and new beginnings. And in the back I spotted Marcus. He'd come alone, dressed in a suit that looked slightly less expensive than his usual attire. Our eyes met across the room, and he gave me a small nod. I nodded back. No hard feelings. No gloating. Just acknowledgement of two people whose lives had diverged, who'd both learned lessons the hard way. Thank you all for being here tonight. I began, my voice steady and clear. This gallery exists because of a simple belief. That art should be accessible, that talent deserves support regardless of pedigree or connections, and that the most powerful stories often come from the most unexpected places. After the speech, after the congratulations and the networking and the champagne, I found myself standing alone in the gallery, looking at the artwork on the walls. Each piece was carefully chosen, each artist someone I believed in. James appeared beside me, 2 glasses of champagne in hand. He offered me one. I didn't take a chance. I made an investment in talent. There's a difference. He clinked his glass against mine. My aunt tells me you've been teaching her granddaughter about art. I smiled. Mrs. Chen's granddaughter, Lily, was a bright 13-year-old who'd started hanging around when I came home from work, asking questions about the pieces I was curating. Lily's wonderful. She has a great eye. My aunt says you've been mentoring her, encouraging her to apply to art programs, that you even helped her put together a portfolio. It's nothing, really. It's not nothing, Elena. That's exactly the kind of thing that makes you perfect for this role. You don't just see art as objects to be bought and sold. You see it as a bridge between people, as a way to open doors for others. He paused, looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. That ex-husband of yours was a fool. We all make mistakes. Some bigger than others. James smiled. I should let you get back to your guests. But Elena? I'm glad you ended up in that tiny apartment in my aunt's building. I'm glad I decided to stop by that day. And I'm especially glad that your ex-husband showed up when he did, because the look on his face when I walked in? Priceless. I laughed, nearly choking on my champagne. You knew exactly what you were doing, didn't you? I have no idea what you're talking about. I was simply discussing business with a valued employee. But his eyes were twinkling with mischief. James Chun, you're a troublemaker. Billionaires are allowed to be troublemakers. It's in the contract. He winked and walked away, leaving me shaking my head and smiling. A year later, I moved out of the tiny apartment. Not because I was ashamed of it, but because I'd been accepted into the fellowship program and would be spending the next 2 years studying at the Sorbonne in Paris. Mrs. Chun cried when I told her I was leaving, then immediately started planning to visit me in France. I put most of my things in storage, but I kept that painting I'd done of the coastline, the one James had complimented. It came with me to Paris, hung in my small apartment near the Luxembourg Gardens, a reminder of where I'd been and how far I'd come. Marcus sent me an email when he heard about the fellowship. It was short, just a few lines. Congratulations on Paris. You deserve it. I'm sorry for everything. I hope you find what you're looking for. I wrote back. I already found it. I found myself. I hope you do the same someday. He never replied, and that was okay. The thing about rock bottom is that it gives you solid ground to build on. That tiny apartment that Marcus mocked? It was the foundation of everything that came after. It was where I learned that I didn't need luxury to be happy. I didn't need a penthouse view or a walk-in closet or a husband who measured my worth by his net worth. I needed purpose, passion, the freedom to pursue my dreams, no matter how small my living space or how modest my paycheck. And yes, it was deeply, profoundly satisfying when James Chun walked into that apartment and offered me the world, right in front of the man who told me I was nothing without him. I'm human. I won't pretend that vindication didn't feel amazing. But the real victory wasn't James's offer or the job or the money or any of that. The real victory was that I'd already rebuilt my life before James showed up. I'd already found my footing, already started pursuing my passion, already chosen my own worth over someone else's validation. James just recognized what was already there. He didn't save me, I'd saved myself. I learned something important through all of this. Your worth isn't determined by the size of your apartment or the balance in your bank account. It's not defined by who you're married to or what people think of you. Your worth is inherent, constant, unshakable. And anyone who makes you feel small, who mocks your circumstances or dismisses your dreams, is telling you everything about themselves and nothing about you. Marcus thought he was better than me because he had money, status, a fancy address. But money can't buy character. Status can't buy integrity. And a fancy address doesn't make you a better person. I'd rather live in a tiny apartment and be true to myself than live in a mansion and lose my soul. That's the lesson I wish I could share with everyone who's going through something similar. Everyone who's been left by someone who made them feel worthless. Everyone who's starting over from scratch, living in a place they never imagined they'd end up, wondering if they made the right choice in choosing themselves. You did. You made the right choice. Keep going. Stay true to your values, pursue your passions, and trust that the right opportunities will come when you're ready for them. And if your ex shows up to mock your circumstances, just wait. Keep the door open. You never know when a billionaire might stop by to remind them what a mistake they made. I'm writing this from my apartment in Paris now. It's still small, Parisian apartments usually are, but it has a balcony overlooking a charming street, and on Sunday mornings I can hear the church bells from Notre Dame. I'm working on my dissertation about the democratization of art in the digital age. I'm happy, fulfilled, free. My apartment back home, the tiny one that Marcus mocked? I didn't sell it. Kept it. Sometimes I rent it out to art students who need affordable housing in the city. Sometimes I let it sit empty, a monument to my own resilience. And sometimes when I'm back visiting, I stay there myself. I pull down the Murphy bed, make coffee on the two-burner stove, and look at my little painting of the coast. I remember who I was when I first moved in, broken, scared, uncertain. And I look at who I am now, whole, brave, confident. That apartment will always be sacred to me. Not because of what happened with James and Marcus, though that was certainly memorable, but because it was where I learned to be enough all by myself. 450 square feet of freedom. Worth every penny. Thank you again for being here, for listening, and for being part of this amazing community. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the next story. I've got some incredible tales lined up that I think you're going to absolutely love. Stories of underdogs triumphing, bullies getting their comeuppance, and ordinary people discovering their extraordinary strength. I'll see you in the next video. Until then, remember, small spaces can hold big dreams, fresh starts are nothing to be ashamed of, and you never know when a billionaire might walk through your door to remind everyone what a gem you truly are. Keep your head high, know your worth, and never apologize for choosing yourself. Subscribe now, hit that notification bell, drop a comment below, and I'll see you very soon with another incredible story. Take care, everyone, and remember, you are worthy, you are valuable, and your best chapter might be just beginning.